Think about the last time you felt that really specific, heavy dread of an ending.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough feeling.
Right. Maybe it was like the agonizing, drawn-out final conversation of a breakup. Or maybe it was something smaller, like the realization that a cherished childhood memory is starting to get just a little fuzzy around the edges.
Or even just sitting on your couch on a Sunday night, feeling the end of a really great weekend creeping up on you.
Yes, exactly. Sunday night dread is the worst. But the thing is, we are completely hardwired to look at these moments, these endings, and feel this profound sense of loss.
It's a completely universal reflex. I mean, we cling, we treat every single ending as if it's a failure of the system.
Like a glitch.
Yeah, exactly. Like a glitch in the software of our lives that just wasn't supposed to happen. Somewhere along the line, we decided that permanence is the ultimate goal and, well, dissolution is the enemy.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive on this Friday, March 13th, 2026. Because today, we are going to completely flip that reflex on its head.
We really are.
We've got our hands on excerpts from this mesmerizing, almost hauntingly poetic text by Elias Khora. It's called the Encyclopedia of Dissolving.
It's a brilliant piece of work.
It is. And I want to set the record straight right up front for you listening. This is not some morbid, depressing journey into darkness. The mission today is entirely the opposite.
Right. Khora's core thesis is that dissolution isn't destruction at all. It is the uncategorizing of things.
The uncategorized, I love that phrasing.
Yeah, it's the universe sweeping the floor, basically, clearing the board and making room for whatever comes next. When we fight that uncategorizing, we suffer.
We suffer a lot.
But when we understand the mechanics of it, we actually unlock a totally different, much more liberated way to live.
And what I really love about Khora's approach here is the sheer scale of it. I mean, he literally takes you from A to zero. To really understand how things come apart, we aren't just looking at, abstract philosophy.
No, not at all.
We're starting with the microscopic endings happening inside your body right this second, without you even noticing.
We really have to start at the absolute baseline of human life, which is the breath.
Just breathing.
Just breathing. But Khora describes the physiology of it not just as a mundane biological function, but as this continuous, relentless cycle of life and death.
Wow.
Yeah. So on the inhale, oxygen floods into your blood, your cells are fed, your brain brightens. The inhale is your body physically saying, yes, it's opening up.
And then comes the exhale. Carbon dioxide is pushed out, the lungs contract, the body is saying, done. It's letting go.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the part of this that really caught my attention, the part we almost always ignore, is the physical gap between the exhale and the next inhale.
Ah, yes, the aperture.
Right. For a fraction of a second, you are entirely empty. You are totally still. You are neither filling nor emptying.
And Khora calls this momentary pause the aperture. It's like a tiny window that opens and closes. And he points out that in that specific gap, you are essentially practicing dying.
That is so wild to think about.
You just do it like 10,000 times a day without even paying attention to it.
When I was trying to visualize that gap, that aperture, I kept thinking of a pendulum swinging back and forth.
Oh, that's a good visual.
Right. That microsecond when a swinging pendulum reaches its absolute highest point. Before it swings back down, it just hangs there, completely weightless in midair for a fraction of a second.
Right. It's not going up. It's not going down.
Exactly. In the body. That's the moment the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange is perfectly balanced before the system reverses.
What's fascinating here is that Khora doesn't just stop at physical breathing. He scales this exact same rhythmic mechanism to our emotions. Specifically, he looks at the structure of joy.
Right. Because we have this cultural obsession with treating happiness as a plateau. We think it's a state we're supposed to achieve, climb up to, and then just, pitch a tent and stay in forever.
Right, we want to live there.
Yeah.
But Khora argues that joy isn't a plateau at all. It's a spike.
A spike.
Biologically, it has to be a spike. Joy is a sudden, intense increase in neurochemistry. It's a flood of dopamine and serotonin. But by its very biological design, that flood must naturally return to a baseline.
I want to pause on that for a second, because I think a lot of people listening, myself included, honestly would push back on that.
Oh, for sure.
Isn't that baseline just boring? I mean, if we have the technology or the lifestyle to hack our brains, why shouldn't you try to extend that joy spike indefinitely? Isn't chasing that sustained happiness Basically the whole point of life.
It seems intuitive, yeah.
Yeah.
But Khora dismantles that exact cultural obsession by looking at the actual mechanics of the brain. The attempt to extend the spike indefinitely is actually the root cause of chronic dissatisfaction and, well, addiction.
Really?
Yeah.
Just trying to stay happy.
Yeah, because our neurochemistry just isn't built for a permanent high. When you flood the brain with dopamine for too long, the brain protects itself.
By downregulating the receptors, right?
Exactly, downregulation.
Wait, downregulate meaning my brain literally boards up the windows so the dopamine can't get in.
That is exactly what happens. Think of it like a house. If you flood a house with blindingly bright light all day, eventually you pull the blinds so you don't go blind yourself.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Your brain does the same thing to protect itself from overstimulation. It physically reduces the number of dopamine receptors available.
So if you try to force the spike to be permanent, you end up needing more and more of the stimulus just to feel normal.
Precisely. The baseline isn't an empty, boring void. The baseline is the soil where the spikes actually grow. If you don't have the flat ground, you can't have the mountain peak.
He brings in this really beautiful Japanese concept to explain the emotional side of this, too. Mono no aware.
Yes, mono no aware. It roughly translates to the bittersweet awareness of impermanence.
It's like the profound feeling you get when you see cherry blossoms falling.
Exactly. The sadness that the blossom is falling doesn't ruin the beauty of the flower. It actually is the source of its beauty. The joy is real because it is temporary.
Because if the joy were permanent,
If the cherry blossom stayed on the tree all year round, it would just become background wallpaper. You wouldn't even notice it. The passing isn't the enemy of the joy. The passing is the joy.
so if the brain literally can't afford the biological energy to sustain a permanent dopamine high, and it has to drop back to baseline to function, does that same energy deficit apply to other things the brain does?
It absolutely does.
Because if our bodies and emotions are constantly dissolving and resetting, what happens when we apply that to the complex systems we rely on, like our personal histories?
That transition from biology to psychology is where Khora's work gets incredibly revealing. Let's look at memory. We usually talk about memory as if it's a vault.
Or a library?
Right, a library where old files are securely stored. We think we're just pulling a dusty book off a shelf exactly as we left it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Khora points out that memory isn't storage at all. It is a live reconstruction.
A live reconstruction, yes.
So my childhood memories aren't like a saved Word document sitting untouched on a hard drive. They're more like a Wikipedia page I accidentally rewrite every single time I visit it.
That is a perfect analogy.
I pull the fragments together, and the very act of remembering alters the memory for the next time.
Every time you recall an event, your brain physically reconsolidates the neural pathway. It mixes in your current mood, your current biases, and any new information.
That's kind of terrifying.
It is. And because memory is a live, energy-intensive reconstruction, the brain is constantly letting things fade. It's prioritizing. And Khora uses the condition of hyperthymesia to prove why this fading is actually a biological necessity.
Hyperthymesia. That's that rare condition where a person literally cannot forget, right?
Yeah.
They have highly superior autobiographical memory.
Yes. For someone with hyperthymesia, every single day and every meal they ate, every slight against them, every joy and every physical pain is permanently vivid.
And you'd think that would be a superpower. Like
Yeah.
you'd never fail a test, you'd never forget an anniversary.
You would think so, but people who have it often describe it as a waking nightmare.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's an immense, crushing burden. Without forgetting, you would drown in your own past. Imagine if the embarrassment of something you did when you were 12 felt exactly as fresh and agonizing today as it did the moment it happened.
Oh, God, no thank you.
Right. Every wound would stay permanently open. So forgetting isn't a failure of your aging brain. It is a neurological mercy.
A neurological mercy.
It is a necessary dissolution that keeps the past from flooding the present. It clears the lens so you can actually perceive what is happening right now.
Okay, so our brains shed useless memories simply to survive the energy cost. But Khora scales this concept of energy and capacity up even further outside the body to society itself.
Yes, he does.
He brings in the historian Joseph Tainter's theory on the collapse of complex societies. And I have to say, this really shifted my perspective.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the parallel is striking. Just as a brain can be overwhelmed by the energy required to maintain too many memories, a civilization can be overwhelmed by the energy required to maintain its own complexity.
So societies get overwhelmed just like our brains do.
Exactly. Tainter argues that civilizations don't usually fall because of some sudden dramatic catastrophe, like a single meteor or an invading army. They fall because they over-optimize.
Walk me through that. How is a collapse an optimization? Because usually we think of optimization as making things better and more efficient.
Right. Well, think of complexity as a problem-solving strategy. A burgeoning civilization has a problem with trade, so it builds a road.
Makes sense.
That road is transformative. It yields a massive return on investment. But to protect the road, you need an army.
Okay.
To feed the army, you need complex agriculture. To manage the agriculture, you need a sprawling bureaucracy. Eventually, you haven't built one road, you've built 10,000 roads.
And the energy that taxes the literal calories required just to maintain the administrative overhead of those 10,000 roads becomes a massive, unsustainable burden.
Exactly. The cost of maintaining the complexity exceeds the energy available to the society.
Wow.
And when that happens, the system fractures. The collapse isn't an error, it's the system simplifying itself, because simplicity has become more adaptive, more survivable than complexity.
So breaking a massive starving empire back down into local self-sustaining villages is actually an optimization.
Yes. Khora challenges us to look at the ground beneath our feet. Everything you are standing on right now, every modern institution, every tradition, every assumption is just topsoil.
Topsoil. Okay.
It's made from the compost of past structures. Rome fell, the Maya dispersed, and their simplified remnants became the rich soil for whatever grew next.
It's the ultimate recycling program. But, if you're listening to this on your commute right now, that might sound terrifying. The idea that everything you are building, maybe even the company you work for or the society you live in, is just temporary compost waiting to simplify itself.
It can be unsettling, for sure.
And it brings up a really deep question for me. If my memories are just live Wikipedia reconstructions that fade, and the society I live in is just compost, who exactly is the you experiencing all of this? Who am I in this equation?
That is the core of Khora's section on identity and ego death, and it's where the philosophy gets very deep. He argues that the self is not a thing.
Not a thing.
No. It is a verb pretending to be a noun.
So what does this all mean? A verb pretending to be a noun. I love that phrasing, but what does that practically mean for us?
It means the brain is constantly self-reducing. It is a continuous activity, just like the heart is beating or the lungs are breathing. Neurologically, this is largely tied to a network in the brain called the default mode network. This network is constantly taking raw experiences and tagging them with the label mine.
So if I, stub my toe, the raw experience is just pain exists in this localized area.
Yeah.
But the default mode network steps in and says, no, my toe hurts. This is happening to me.
Precisely. The self is the narrator organizing the data. But under certain conditions like deep meditation or with psychedelics that physically quiet the default mode network, or even during moments of profound, shocking grief, that tagging system shuts down.
The narrator goes quiet.
Yes. That is what we call ego death. The experience of life continues, but the rigid boundaries of the experiencer dissolve.
So essentially our entire identity is just a clerical habit of the brain.
Basically, yes.
That is wild. And Khora uses this incredibly visceral image of a caterpillar going into a chrysalis to explain what happens when that clerical habit gets disrupted.
Oh, the organic soup metaphor.
Yes. He points out that when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, it doesn't just sprout wings from its back. It literally liquefies into an organic soup. All its structures break down completely.
Right, it completely dissolves.
And Khora applies this to the feeling of abandonment, like when a deep relationship ends. The we dissolves, and suddenly you are in the chrysalis. You are the soup.
It's terrifying because your identity, your default mode network, was entirely tethered to that relationship. The form you were has dissolved, and the form you will become hasn't assembled yet. You just have to sit in the soup of not knowing.
I have to push back here, though, with a very practical concern.
Sure, go ahead.
If I'm just a verb, right? If my identity is just a continuous activity, my brain is doing to tag things as mine. Who is the one getting out of bed in the morning? Who is paying my taxes? Who is actually feeling heartbroken when someone leaves?
That's the million-dollar question.
Is the self basically just my smartphone's operating system? It's necessary for the apps to run and for me to navigate the day, but it's not the physical hardware of the phone itself.
This raises an important question, and honestly, that is a phenomenal analogy.
Thanks.
Yes, Khora isn't saying the self is useless or that you should pretend it doesn't exist. The operating system is highly adaptive for navigating the world, paying taxes, and making breakfast.
Great.
The suffering only comes when you mistake the operating system for the hardware. When you think the OS is all you are, and if the OS crashes, you cease to exist.
So how do we actually live with that knowledge?
Khora uses a metaphor of surviving a flood. After you go through an ego death, after you've been in the soup and your operating system is rebooted, you still return to your life.
You still have to pay taxes.
Exactly. You still live in the house of your identity, still answer to your name, but you now know the water can rise. You know the foundation isn't perfectly solid. You know the self is a construction, and because you know that, you hold it much more lightly.
You know the water can rise. That is chilling, but also strangely comforting, you know? It takes the pressure off.
It really does.
Okay, so we've dissolved the breath, we've dissolved society into compost, we've even dissolved the concept of the self into a smartphone OS.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. Now, Khora takes us to the absolute limit. If the self dissolves, what about the environment it lives in? What happens when the universe itself dissolves?
So here, Khora points us toward the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy.
Right, physics.
The universe has a definitive trajectory, and that trajectory is moving from order to disorder. Energy is constantly spreading out. Eventually, in the deep, incomprehensible future, the universe will reach thermal equilibrium.
This is known as heat death, right?
Yes, heat death. Every star will burn out, every black hole will evaporate, the cosmos will become a cold, uniform, structureless mist where no work can be done, the ultimate dissolution.
But wait, Khora doesn't just leave it at a cold, structureless mist. This is where he brings in the mathematical concept of zero, right? Which I found so fascinating, because we usually think of zero as just nothingness, a void.
Exactly, and that's a massive misconception. Khora includes a whole segment on zero returning. Historically, mathematicians actually resisted the concept of zero.
Really?
Yeah, the Romans didn't have a numeral for it because the idea of a number representing nothing was philosophically terrifying to them.
That makes sense.
But zero isn't nothing. On a coordinate plane, zero is the origin. It is the exact point from which all positive and negative quantities emerge. Zero is absolute potential.
So when the universe experiences heat death, or, when we experience our own physical death, it isn't a subtraction into nothingness. It's a return to the absolute potential of zero.
Precisely. It is the board being wiped completely clean so the math can start over.
Okay, let me play the existential skeptic for a second here.
Bring it on.
If the universe is literally ending in a featureless mist, returning to zero, and every single thing we just talked about, every fading memory, every collapsed civilization, every broken heart will be completely erased and remembered by absolutely no one, doesn't that render everything we do totally meaningless? Why even try?
It's a very natural question to ask, but Khora gently dismantles that exact nihilism.
How so?
He points out that the reality of an experience does not depend on its permanent preservation. A sunset is real for the 12 minutes it lasts.
Wow, yeah.
The fact that it gets dark afterward doesn't mean the colors weren't there. The love was real while it burned. And more importantly, he looks at what he calls the miracle of the middle.
The miracle of the middle, meaning the time between the Big Bang and heat death.
Exactly. The atoms in your body were forged in the cores of dying stars. You are literal stardust that has temporarily organized into a nervous system complex enough to listen to a deep dive, read a book, and ask questions about its own existence.
That is incredible to think about.
Khora says, you are not a speck in the cosmos. You are the cosmos's way of specking. You are the universe waking up for a brief moment to experience its own dissolving.
The cosmos' way of specking. I love that.
The noticing is the entire point. If there is no one there to notice the universe, it's just a cold, blind mechanism. Your temporary, fleeting awareness is the very thing that gives the universe its meaning.
You are the universe's way of noticing itself. That completely changes the paradigm.
It really does.
So, taking all of this in, from the microscopic to the cosmic, we started by looking at the gap between our breaths, that tiny aperture where the pendulum hangs, and we practice letting go.
Right.
We looked at how our brains drop memories to save energy, and how our civilizations collapse into compost for the exact same reason. We stripped away the illusion of the permanent self, realizing our identity is just a clerical habit.
An operating system we can learn to hold lightly.
Exactly. And finally, we stared down the heat death of the universe itself, not as a tragedy, but as a return to the absolute potential of zero.
And through all of it, the mechanism is the same. Endings, whether it's a breakup, a lost job, a fading memory, or the end of a star, they're not errors in the system. They're the system clearing the board to make room for what's next.
I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought to mull over today. Something that builds on Khora's idea of the aperture, that brief gap we talked about in the breath, where focus naturally narrows and dissolves to make room for new growth.
It's an important concept for today's world.
It really is. We just talked about how the self and the universe naturally dissolve to return us to zero, to pure, silent potential. But look at your daily life right now. We live in an attention economy that is explicitly engineered to forcibly dissolve your focus 100 times a day.
Oh, absolutely.
Notifications, infinite feeds, endless scrolling. If true dissolution is supposed to be a natural biological cycle that returns you to a silent baseline, what happens when your aperture is hacked? What happens when your attention is dissolved for you by a screen before you ever reach that silence?
It's a scary thought.
Are you controlling your own endings, or are you letting an algorithm do it for you?
That really is the modern challenge, isn't it? Finding the space to let things end naturally and experiencing that zero rather than having it artificially interrupted all the time.
Exactly. So today, as you go about your life, try to notice those little gaps.
Yeah.
Notice the pause between your breaths. Notice the silence when a song ends. Enjoy the miracle of the middle, because even though every great weekend eventually turns into Sunday night dread, that ending is just making room for whatever comes next.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.